A rule that becomes particularly important when we are looking at the Piale stem is the rule that deals with the so-called Schemen-Levi letters, or if you pronounce the Vav with a W, Schemen-Lewi. And the letters themselves are the sibilants, that's what the S stands for, so Samech, Tzadeh, Sin, and Shin. And then the other letters in Schemen-Levi relate to one letter apiece, so Kof, Mem, Nun, Lamed, Vav or Waw, and Yod. And what this rule says is that if any one of these letters, so for instance a Kof, if a Kof has a Dagesh forte, but typically through vowel changes, if that vowel changes to a vocal schwa, then that Dagesh forte may go away. It may not be written. We may see the same word written with the vocal schwa without the Dagesh forte. Here's some examples. Here we have the word shilacha from Proverbs 31:20. Talking about the virtuous woman, she stretches forth her hand. It's a Piale perfect third feminine singular. But we have the same word in Ezekiel 17:7 and Ezekiel 31:4, but notice that it's written without the Dagesh forte. It's still a Piale perfect third feminine singular, shilacha, but it's written without the Dagesh forte. So there's no rhyme nor reason. Some of the Masoretes would point it with a Dagesh forte, some would point it without a Dagesh forte. This becomes a little bit more of an issue because the form can overlap, let's say for instance with shilcha, which is a cal imperative with a paragogic he. This is seen in 1 Samuel 16:11, for example. And so the only way we can tell the difference between these is context. For instance, we know that we need to have a feminine verb to go with a feminine subject here. And here we're expecting, here's Samuel giving a command, we're expecting an imperative. So context tells us. But notice that because this is one of those letters, the Lamed is one of those Schemen-Levi letters, in particular cases where we would expect to see a Dagesh forte, the Dagesh forte may be left out. Okay, so that's the basics of how the Schemen-Levi letters work. And particularly this is an issue with the Piale stem because of that Dagesh forte in the second root letter, which sometimes has a vowel that changes to a vocal schwa. Let's take a look now at Genesis 37, verses 6 through 10. So we'll start reading at verse 6. Vayomer Elohem Shema'u na hachalom hazeh esher chalamti. All right, so we have Vayomer, very common Vayiktol form, the Vav consecutive, with the familiar verb amar. The base meaning would be and he said, and we're looking for a subject. Did somebody say, well, there's no subject here, it's just and he said, Elohem, preposition el and pronominal suffix hem, to them. And he said to them. In context, we're looking back, and the person who's speaking is Joseph. And this is what he says then, Shema'u na. So we have what looks like the root shama, which means to listen, to hear, to obey. Then we have this particle of entreaty, now or please, and so I'm kind of expecting an imperative here. It has the form of a cal imperative, shema'u, masculine plural. Theoretically, because of the mem being a Schemen-Levi letter, this could be a Piale perfect third common plural. And because the letter is one of the Schemen-Levi letters, it's a mem, and it has a vocal schwa, it could drop its Dagesh forte. Now, I think we know Shema well enough that we don't have to worry about that, but just to check it, if we didn't know Shema very well, we might have to figure this out in another place. Well, let's take a look at that. I'm going to bring up Holliday's lexicon, and I've got Shema up here. It's a fairly inexpensive lexicon. It's good quality. And I see that there's Cal, Nifal, and then I come down to PL, and the only example I see is an imperfect. And so I don't have to worry about it being a PL perfect. So I can discard that. But in general, if we don't know a verb very well, and if we don't have the particle of entreaty after it that makes us think that we're probably looking at a imperative or some kind of a modal that's not indicative, let's say, let's do something or do something, I might need to go and check to see whether this could possibly be something other than a cal imperative, for instance, a PL that dropped its Dagesh forte. Okay, so a little bit of a side there. So, and he said to them, hear now, and this is what he wants them to hear about, ha-chalom hazeh, the dream this, or this dream, esher chalamti. And so here's the word for dream from the same root that chalamti comes from. And so we have this dream which I dreamed. So Joseph dreamed a dream. Very common in Hebrew to put the two roots together like that, the noun and the verb. So I dreamed a dream, I feared a fear. We'll actually see one a little bit later in this passage. So verse 6, and he said to them, hear now this dream which I dreamed. And now he goes on to continue in verse 7. Let's go ahead and read verse 7 slowly. V'hanei anachnu ma'alamim alumim batok chasadeh. V'hanei kama alumati v'gam nitzava v'hanei tisubena elumotechem vatishtachavena la elumati. All right, that's an interesting verse. V'hanei, he says that several times in this verse. And behold, v'hanei, anachnu, we, this is that first common plural pronoun. Now we have a fairly classic PL participle. So the PL participle is formed with a mem in front. We've got the root alam, and it means to gather, as in gather sheaves. So here we have the characteristic PL diagnostics of the mem prefix, the vocal schwa prefix vowel, the patak as the R1 root vowel, and the Dagesh forte in the R2. So all those put together tell you this is a PL participle. And then we go ahead and look at the ending. Well, obviously it's a masculine plural ending. So we have a PL participle, and it's masculine plural, absolute because of the im ending. Notice that the masculine plural subject, anachnu, we, matches the participle. So we were gathering, or we were sheaving, I guess there's not really a verb like that, but we were gathering, and then what were they gathering? Now we're in the next line here. We were gathering alumim, sheaves. And so here's another case where we have the verb alam matched up with a noun that comes from the same root. We were gathering sheaves, or we were sheaving sheaves, to make it sound a little bit more like the same root. Move on then to batok. We're gathering sheaves, batok chasadeh. Batok can mean in the midst of, so here we have chasadeh, the field, so in the midst of the field. So we were gathering sheaves in the midst of the field, and behold, he says behold again, And behold, kama, this comes from the root kum, and it's a third feminine singular, which goes together with aluma here. Notice we have alumati here. If you weren't looking very carefully at the vowels, you might mistake this for a cal-perfect first common singular with a T ending. But notice the vowels are not correct here. It's not alamti. That would be the verb. This is alumati. And so we're looking at the noun aluma, which is a feminine noun, and then the first common singular ending. So we're looking at my sheaf. Aluma is sheaf. And so because this is feminine, it matches the feminine verb here. And so kum means to arise, to stand up. And my sheaf stood up, and we move on, vagam nitsava. Here we have a tricky verb. Notice we have a dagesh forte in the sade. So that's telling us something. Remember, a dagesh forte always tells you something. That tells us that we may have lost a noon here. So we have what looks like it might be a nafal, but it might have buried another noon. And so let's consider the root natsav, to stand. If that noon in that one noon verb got buried, the dagesh forte would be showing that. So let's take a look at our lexicon again. Bring up Holiday's lexicon, and I'm going to look for natsav, and notice that in the nafal we have nitzava, and there it is with the dagesh forte. It's kind of hard to see there, but it does have a dagesh forte. But in the pausal, that vocal schwa, which we see there, has lengthened. And so it's lengthened to a comets. So it's a little bit tricky because of that pausal form. We're looking at the nafal perfect third feminine singular of the root natsav. It's relating to back to aluma, my sheaf. And also my sheaf stood, and also it stood. So all of this fits together. We got the feminine verb going with the feminine subject back here. So my sheaf arose, and also it stood. So moving on, then we have, and behold, vahane, tisubena. So we have the typical imperfect prefix. The dagesh forte here tells us that we're probably looking at savav, geminate verb, with the tav prefix and the na ending. So it looks like we have a cal imperfect, either third feminine plural or second feminine plural. We'll have to figure that out. It's the same form. And so we'll come down to look for a explicit subject, and we have alumotechem. And so here we have a feminine plural, alumot, with the pronominal suffix, second masculine plural. So this would be your sheaves. So the feminine plural here matches the feminine plural, so it would be third feminine plural is what we're looking at. And it's your sheaves surrounded. So, and behold, your sheaves surrounded, probably it, meaning my sheaf. Notice that you've got alumot here, which is our expected feminine ending, but up above we had alumim. This is interesting. This is a feminine noun, but for some reason it's got a masculine plural ending on it. So alumim rather than what we'd expect, which is alumot. And here when we put a pronominal suffix on it, it actually has the expected ot for the feminine plural. Hebrew every once in a while messes with the endings, not too often, but every once in a while it does. And this is just one case where we have a masculine ending even though it's a feminine noun. And then the feminine ending shows up when we put a pronominal suffix on it. So we have, and behold, your sheaves surrounded, the direct object is implied, surrounded it, meaning my sheaf. And then we have an interesting verb here, tishtachavena. Notice that we've got the noon and the comets. We're expecting to see a hey there. So we would expect to see a comets hey with a noon. But it doesn't show up. That's why it's important to pronounce these words. So we have the ending here, na. When we pronounce it, it sounds like what we're looking for. It sounds like what we're looking for, that feminine plural ending for an imperfect, but the hey is missing. This happens once in a while. It's pretty rare, but every once in a while you'll see that hey ending doesn't show up, and you just have to assume that you've got the feminine plural imperfect ending here. This is a weird stem. The root is thought by many to be chava, and so if it is, then we have what's called a hishtafel stem, which, if you think that the hitpael is weird, the hishtafel is even stranger. And Hebrew has a few of these rare stems. The main 7 we've covered, but it has a few other ones that we come across every once in a while. So this would be the hishtafel, and again, it's the hishtafel imperfect, third feminine plural, and it's referring back to the alumot, the sheaves of the brothers, and this root, chava, means to bow down or to worship. And so the idea is then that they, meaning your sheaves, bowed down. And then finally we have la alumati, my sheaf. So this becomes they bowed down to my sheaf. So at the very end we have, and behold, your sheaves surrounded, it is implied, and they bowed down to my sheaf. Let's go through the whole verse here. Verse 7. And behold, we were gathering sheaves, or we were sheaving sheaves in the midst of the field, and behold, my sheaf arose, and also it stood, and behold, your sheaves surrounded it, and they bowed down to my sheaf. So that's verse 7. All right, let's move on to verse 8. Vayomeru lo echayv hemalok timlok alenu immashol timshol banu vayosefu od seno oto al chalom taiv va'al divaraiv. Okay, we have a nice vav consecutive here, or vayiktol, they often call it, vayiktol. And they said, lo, to him, preposition, pronominal suffix. And who is it? We're looking for a potential subject, echayv, his brothers. And his brothers said to him. So we have a specific subject, so we don't say they said, we just say his brothers said to him. And now we have this question. We've got the interrogative hey at the beginning of it, and we have an infinitive absolute followed by an imperfect, and it's being used for emphasis here. So we have hamalok, timlok, will you indeed rule alenu, over us? So they're obviously not real happy with this dream that he just related to them. And so without the question, malok, timlok, you will surely, or you will indeed rule. But they're asking the question, will you indeed rule over us? And then they go on. Similarly, they've got the im here, which is if. It's kind of still asking the question. And then again, infinitive construct, mashol, timshol. banu. And so it's sort of similar. Mashal is to rule. So if you will indeed rule over us, probably continuing on with a question. We have the root yasaf, and it's a vav consecutive, imperfect, and it's third masculine plural. And they added yet, and then we have here sano, a nice infinitive construct of the root sane, to hate. And so literally, and they added yet to hate oto, him. So they added yet to hate him, meaning, and they hated him all the more. It's kind of the idea. They increased their hate for him. So ironically, you've got a root that's similar to the name Joseph, and yet it's describing how his brothers hate Joseph all the more. And then here's why they hated him. Al chalamotav, concerning his dream, va'al divariv, and concerning his words. So they hated him because of his dream and because of his words. All right, let's move on to verse 9 here. Let me just read verse 9 relatively slowly here. Vayachalom, chalom acher, vayisaper oto le'achayv, vayomer hine, chalamti chalom od, v'hine hashemesh, v'hayareach, v'achad asar kokavim, mishtachavim li. Okay, interesting. So vayachalom, we don't see a subject here. So, and he dreamed, cal imperfect vayiktal form here for chalam, third masculine singular, vayachalom, he dreamed, od again, or yet, chalom, a dream, acher, afterwards. So he dreamed a dream. He dreamed again a dream after. Vayisaper, and here we have a nice looking piel. Notice the characteristics here. We have the prefix vowel of vocal schwa under the yod prefix. We have the R1 vowel of partach. We have the dagger's forte in the second root letter. And then we have the expected E-class vowel, EI class vowel, as the R2 letter, the theme vowel. So vayisaper, that's a piel of the root safar. We need to maybe see what that means in our lexicon. So let's take a look. Look at Holliday's lexicon again. We'll put in safar and the piel. Okay, it says various meanings here. Count, check off, count up, detail, make known or proclaim. Okay, so here he's proclaiming something. He makes known. And so here it's Joseph, still referring to Joseph here. And he made known something. Apparently, here's our direct object, oto, and he made it known, referring back to the dream. And he made it known, le'echayv, to his brothers. Vayomer, and he, Joseph, said, and he said, behold, chalamti, I dreamed, chalom, I dreamed a dream, od, again, I dreamed another dream. Down to the next line, v'hanei, hashemesh, the sun, v'hayareach, and the moon, and achad asar, 110 or 11, kokavim, 11 stars. So the sun, the moon, and 11 stars. Then we have a participial form of that weird hishtafel that we saw earlier. When you see a strange form like this with the hisht at the beginning, or at least the sheen and tav, and then a chet and a consonantal vav, think of this verb chava, to bow down. Notice, however, that we have the mem prefix and the im ending. So we have a masculine plural participle, which matches all this combination of stuff. The sun, the moon, and the 11 stars. They were bowing down to me. So let's take a look at the entire verse again. And he dreamed again, or he dreamed yet, a dream, acher. Another dream or after, either one. The acher can have either one of those meanings. He dreamed yet a dream after, or he dreamed yet another dream. And he recounted it to his brothers. He proclaimed it to his brothers. And he said, behold, I dreamed a dream again, or I dreamed another dream, or I dreamed yet a dream. I dreamed again a dream. And behold, the sun and the moon and 11 stars were bowing down to me. Let's finish with verse 10 here. Vayisaper el aviv ve'el achiv, vayagar bo aviv, vayomer lo, ma hachalom hazeh. Down to the bottom here. Asher halamta, hevo navo ani ve'imcha ve'achecha, lehishtachavot lecha arza. Okay, let's come back to the beginning of this verse. Vayisaper, and he recounted. We're looking, there's no subject there apparently, so as he recounted to Aviv, to his father, Ve'el Achiv, to his brothers, and we had a direct object for Yisaper before. He recounted it, meaning the dream, seems to be implied here, and he recounted it, meaning the dream, to his father and to his brothers, and Aviv, his father, rebuked him. Ga'ar is to rebuke. We have a vayiktol, the vav consecutive of the third masculine singular of the root ga'ar, and the subject here is his father, Aviv, it would be Jacob. So Aviv, his father, rebuked him. Notice the bait with the third masculine singular direct object. If you check a lexicon for the verb ga'ar, you'll find that the bait can occur with the direct object. Vayomer, and he said, lo, to him, and he said to him, Ma, what is this? Ma hachalom chazeh, what is this dream? Esher chalamta, which you have dreamed. A nice perfect of chalam, second masculine singular. And the patak there under the lamed is changed to a comets because of its pausal form. We've got the atnach here, it's a pausal. And so that vowel lengthened. What is this dream that you have dreamed? He's a little bit upset maybe here. Havo, navo. So now here is, again, we have the interrogative particle, hey, an infinitive absolute along with the finite verb. We saw something like that before. Will you indeed? Only our verb here is a cal imperfect first common plural. So we come. Here we have an infinitive absolute of the same root, bo, and he's asking the question, shall we indeed come, meaning I and your mother and your brothers? So shall we indeed come, I and your mother and your brothers? And then we have an infinitive construct of the same weird verb we've been looking at, chava, with a lamed there. So this is an infinitive construct, means to bow down, and it's kind of an odd form there. It's a 3-hey verb, chava. Notice the ot ending for the infinitive construct because it's a 3-hey verb. Okay, so to bow down to you, artsa, to the earth, or earthward. Note the directional hey here. Shall we indeed come, I and your mother and your brothers, to bow down to you, to the earth? Let's go back through verse 10. And he recounted to his father and to his brothers, meaning he recounted it, and his father rebuked him. And he said to him, what is this dream which you have dreamed? And I have to, actually, I didn't notice that before, but I had to supply the to be verb there. What is this dream? Ma ha-chalom, I just apply a to be verb, which is perfectly legitimate. What is this dream which you have dreamed? Will we indeed come, I and your mother and your brothers, to bow down to you, earthward or to the earth? So that is Genesis 37, 6 through 10.